If the moon landing was fake, the world today would look very different. Not slightly different, completely different. Because something that big doesn't stay hidden forever, it leaves patterns, or it leaves cracks. This isn't about arguing or debating. Let's treat this as a thought experiment. We'll assume, just for a moment, that the moon landing never happened, and then we'll ask a simple question: what would the world look like today? Some people question the moon landing for different reasons. Old footage can look unusual, photos can raise questions, and sometimes the scale of the achievement feels almost too big to believe. But instead of focusing on individual claims, let's step back. If it really was staged, what chain of events would that create over the next 50 years? To fake the moon landing, it wouldn't be a small operation. It would involve thousands of engineers, scientists, and technicians. Not just actors, but entire teams coordinating in perfect secrecy. Every signal, every transmission, every broadcast would need to be carefully controlled, from launch to landing and back again, across multiple countries and tracking stations. And crucially, no real missions would actually take place. No spacecraft traveling to the moon, no landings, just a perfectly constructed illusion. But the challenge wouldn't end in 1969. The story would need to hold together for decades, across generations, governments, and technological changes. No credible insider could ever reveal the truth. No documents could surface that break the story. No contradictions could grow large enough to matter. In other words, it wouldn't just be a fake event, it would be one of the most perfectly maintained illusions in human history. Now let's look at what we would expect to see today. If it were fake, independent observers would never confirm it. No one outside the original group would be able to verify anything. But in reality, signals from the missions were tracked by observatories and stations around the world, not just in one country, but globally. If it were fake, other space agencies would eventually expose it, especially during times of political rivalry. The incentive to reveal a lie would be enormous, but instead, other nations tracked the missions and later built on similar technologies themselves. No major contradiction ever emerged. If nothing actually landed on the moon, there would be no consistent physical evidence left behind. Nothing to measure, reflect, or interact with. But instruments placed on the moon are still used today. They reflect lasers sent from Earth, allowing precise measurements of distance. If the missions were fake, the technology behind them wouldn't truly exist, progress would stall or collapse under scrutiny. Instead, space technology advanced. From satellites to deep space missions, each step building on the last. A fabricated story tends to drift over time, details change, contradictions appear, but the data, recordings, and accounts have remained consistent for decades. Across independent sources and technologies, the larger the deception, the harder it becomes to maintain. Not just once, but continuously. Time doesn't protect a false story, it tests it, and weak points tend to surface. Real events, on the other hand, leave traces that accumulate, each new piece reinforcing the last. Questioning is part of understanding, but rejecting consistent evidence requires something else. It requires ignoring the pattern as it grows clearer. If the moon landing had been fake, today's world would be full of gaps, contradictions, and silence. But that's not what we see. We see consistency, we see verification, we see progress built on real foundations, and often, the simplest explanation is the right one. The missions happened. If you enjoy exploring ideas through logic like this, subscribe to Dr. Malcolm.